I thought losing my son Benjamin was the worst pain I could ever endure. But watching his wife Cassandra immediately start calculating the value of his assets while his body was still warm taught me that grief can always deepen when you discover the person sitting beside you at the funeral is already planning how to spend your dead child's money. What she didn't know was that Benjamin had secretly changed everything in his will just weeks before the accident, and her shocked expression when she finally learned the truth would be the only comfort I'd find in those dark months ahead. Hold up, I'm curious where you're listening from, and if this story spoke to you, make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, what I have planned for tomorrow is going to blow you away. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Riverside General Hospital. Car accident on Highway 92, just outside Millbrook. Benjamin was gone before the ambulance even arrived. I remember sitting in my kitchen in Oakwood Heights, still in my nightgown, staring at the phone in my hand, long after the doctor had hung up. The words kept echoing. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartford. We did everything we could." Benjamin was only 32. My brilliant, gentle boy who taught third grade at Clearwater Elementary and spent his weekends volunteering at the animal shelter. He'd just bought his first house, a beautiful colonial on Maple Street, with the white picket fence he'd dreamed about since childhood. His garage held 2 cars, the practical Honda he drove daily and the classic 1967 Mustang he'd been restoring as a labor of love for 3 years. It was going to be a surprise for his future children someday, a car Daddy had built just for them. Within an hour, Cassandra was at my door. "Oh, Ruth," she sobbed, collapsing into my arms with theatrical grief. "I can't believe he's gone. What are we going to do?" I held her. This woman my son had married just 18 months earlier after a whirlwind romance. Cassandra Winters had swept into Benjamin's life like a storm. Beautiful, vivacious, and completely different from the quiet, bookish women he usually dated. She was a real estate agent from the upscale part of town, always immaculately dressed, always networking, always talking about her next big sale or investment opportunity. At first, I'd been happy for Benjamin. He seemed energized by her ambition, proud to be with someone so polished and successful. But over time, I noticed changes. He became stressed about money in ways he'd never been before. Cassandra had expensive tastes, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, luxury vacations. Benjamin had started working extra tutoring jobs to keep up with her lifestyle. "We need to start making arrangements," Cassandra said, pulling back from our embrace. Her eyes were red, but I noticed her makeup was perfectly applied. Who puts on a full face of makeup to come console their mother-in-law at 3 a.m.? "We need to figure out the house situation," she continued, her voice taking on a businesslike tone. "I assume Benjamin left everything to me, being his wife and all. The house, the cars, his savings account. I'll probably need to sell the Mustang. I mean, what would I do with a project car?" Something cold settled in my stomach. Benjamin's Mustang had been his pride and joy. He'd spent countless hours in that garage, carefully restoring every detail. It was going to be a surprise for his future children someday, a car Daddy had built just for them. "Cassandra," I said carefully, "maybe we should focus on the funeral arrangements first. There will be time to deal with other matters later." She nodded quickly, but I caught something in her expression. Impatience, perhaps, or calculation. Over the next few days, as we planned Benjamin's funeral, I watched Cassandra carefully. While I was lost in grief, she was busy. On the phone with lawyers, asking about probate timelines, meeting with the bank about Benjamin's accounts, scheduling an appointment with a real estate agent to get the house appraised. "Just for insurance purposes," she explained when I asked. "You know, to make sure everything's properly valued for the estate." The funeral was beautiful. Benjamin would have loved seeing his classroom full of 8-year-olds singing "You Are My Sunshine," his favorite song to sing with them. His colleagues from Clearwater Elementary shared stories about his kindness, his patience, his gift with children who struggled in school. Cassandra played the grieving widow perfectly, Designer black dress, tasteful jewelry, just the right amount of tears. She accepted condolences graciously, spoke movingly about Benjamin's dreams for their future together, and mentioned several times how much he would have wanted his assets to provide for her security. But I noticed other things, too. How her eyes swept the room, cataloging who was there, making mental notes about connections that might be useful for her real estate business. How she slipped business cards to several people, mentioning that she'd be transitioning her career and could help them with any property needs.
The house should sell for at least $400,000, Cassandra was saying, her voice low but excited. And Benjamin had a decent life insurance policy through the school district, plus his savings, the 401k, and whatever that old car is worth. What about his mother? Natalie asked. Cassandra shrugged. What about her? Benjamin was my husband. Everything goes to the spouse unless there's a will saying otherwise, and Benjamin never made one. He was only 32. Who thinks about dying at 32? I gripped my coffee cup tighter, standing just outside the kitchen door. You're so lucky, Natalie continued. I mean, tragic about Benjamin, of course, but financially, you're set. You can finally buy that condo downtown you've been wanting. I know. It's awful to even think about it while I'm grieving, but Benjamin would want me to be taken care of. He was always worried about my financial security. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in Benjamin's childhood bedroom, surrounded by his things. His teaching awards on the wall, photos of his students, the model airplane we'd built together when he was 12. I thought about what Cassandra had said. Benjamin never made a will, but she was wrong about that. 3 weeks before his death, Benjamin had called me. It was unusual. He typically texted or stopped by on weekends. But that Tuesday evening, he'd sounded strange, tired, stressed. Mom, I need to ask you something important, he'd said. If something happened to me, would you make sure my things went to good homes, especially the Mustang? I want it to go to some kid who will appreciate the work, not just sell it for cash. I laughed, trying to lighten his mood. Benjamin, honey, you're 32 years old. Nothing's going to happen to you. I know, but I've been thinking about it lately. Cassandra and we see things differently sometimes, about what's important, about family. He'd paused for a long moment. I went to see a lawyer yesterday, Mom. Drew up a will. I just wanted you to know. At the time, I thought it was responsible of him, if a bit morbid. Young married couples should have wills. But sitting in his bedroom that night, holding his favorite childhood book, I realized Benjamin might have known something I was only beginning to understand. Cassandra wasn't the woman I thought she was, and Benjamin, in his quiet, thoughtful way, had been trying to protect the things that mattered most to him. The next morning, I would call Benjamin's lawyer and learn just how well my son had known his wife and how carefully he'd planned for a future he somehow sensed might be shorter than any of us imagined. We poured our hearts into researching and telling this story. If you're hooked, show some love with a subscribe. Now, where were we? The call to Benjamin's lawyer confirmed my worst fears and my greatest hope all at once. At first, I told myself maybe I was being too harsh on Cassandra. Grief affects people differently, and perhaps her focus on practical matters was just her way of coping. But the signs kept mounting, each one harder to ignore than the last. 3 days after the funeral, I drove to Benjamin's house on Maple Street to help Cassandra go through his belongings. I'd expected to find her sorting through memories, maybe keeping his favorite books or the photo albums from our family trips. Instead, I found her in the garage with a clipboard, cataloging everything with the methodical precision of an insurance adjuster. "Ruth, perfect timing," she said without looking up from the half-restored Mustang. "I've been making a list of everything valuable. This car is going to be tricky to price since it's not finished, but I found some paperwork showing Benjamin spent over $15,000 on parts alone. My heart sank watching her run her manicured fingers over the cherry red fender Benjamin had spent months perfecting. She was touching it like an appraiser, not a widow remembering her husband's passion. "What about his teaching materials?" I asked, nodding toward the boxes of classroom supplies Benjamin kept in the corner. "His books, the students' artwork he saved." Cassandra waved dismissively. "Junk, mostly. I'll donate whatever the school doesn't want." She made a note on her clipboard. "The tools, though, these are good quality. Should get decent money at auction." I picked up a small wooden jewelry box from Benjamin's workbench. He'd made it in high school shop class, spending weeks on the intricate inlay pattern. It was where he kept his spare keys, old coins, and little mementos. Cassandra snatched it from my hands. "Actually, that might be antique. I should have it appraised." She turned it over, examining the bottom for markers makes. "Cassandra, Benjamin made this himself when he was 16. She paused, looking almost embarrassed. "Oh, well, handmade pieces can still have value. Artisan crafts are very popular now." Every interaction felt like watching someone dissect my son's life for spare parts. When I suggested keeping Benjamin's favorite armchair, the one where he graded papers every evening, Cassandra explained it wouldn't match her new aesthetic. When I asked about his collection of children's books, she said she had no use for them since she didn't plan on having kids. The breaking point came when I found her in Benjamin's bedroom, speaking on the phone with someone about liquidating assets quickly.
No, I need cash, not a payment plan, she was saying, pacing near the window. The house goes on the market next week, and I want everything else sold before then. Cleaner presentation for buyers. She noticed me in the doorway and quickly ended the call. "Sorry, just dealing with some financial stuff. Benjamin left everything a bit complicated." But it wasn't complicated. I knew because I'd called Benjamin's lawyer, Harold Morrison, that morning. "Mrs. Hartford," Harold had said, his voice gentle but professional. "I'm glad you called. Benjamin specifically mentioned you might reach out. He was very concerned about ensuring his wishes were properly executed." My hands had trembled as I held the phone. "Harold, Cassandra says Benjamin never made a will." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Hartford, I think you and I need to meet in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" The way he said it made my stomach clench with both dread and anticipation. That evening, Cassandra invited me to dinner at Rossetti's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown. She was unusually chatty, talking about her plans to start fresh and maybe move to a bigger city where her real estate career could really take off. "Benjamin always said I had too much potential to waste in a small town like this," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. "He'd want me to pursue my dreams, don't you think?" I nodded politely, but inside I was thinking about the Benjamin I knew, the one who loved our quiet town, who chose to teach here because he believed small communities mattered, who'd never in his life encouraged anyone to prioritize money over relationships. "Of course I'll miss the house," Cassandra continued, "but it's too big for just me, and the memories are so painful. A fresh start will be healthier." "What about the Mustang?" I asked carefully. She sighed dramatically. "Oh, Ruth, I know how much that car meant to Benjamin, but honestly, what would I do with it? I don't know anything about classic cars, and it would just sit in storage deteriorating. Better to sell it to someone who can appreciate it, right? Use the money for something Benjamin would approve of." Something Benjamin would approve of, like a downtown condo and a new wardrobe for her fresh start. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Cassandra suddenly grabbed my arm. "Ruth, I hope you don't think I'm being heartless about all this. It's just, Benjamin and I talked a lot about finances before he died. He was always worried about leaving me secure. He made me promise that if anything happened, I wouldn't let sentiment get in the way of practical decisions." I studied her face in the streetlight. She looked so sincere, So convincing. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her. Did he really say that? Oh, yes, multiple times. He used to joke that I was too sentimental, that I'd probably turn his garage into a shrine if he wasn't there to stop me. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. He wanted me to sell everything and invest the money wisely, build a future he couldn't give me himself. The lies came so easily to her. Benjamin, who kept every card his students ever gave him, who still had his childhood teddy bear on his bedroom shelf, who had spent 3 years lovingly restoring a car, not for its value, but for the pure joy of creation, that Benjamin would never have told anyone to choose money over sentiment. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the jewelry box, about Cassandra's clipboard, about her perfectly rehearsed story of Benjamin's supposed wishes. I thought about the way she had examined that Mustang like a piece of merchandise instead of the labor of love it truly was. But most of all, I thought about Harold Morrison's voice on the phone and the way he'd said Benjamin was very concerned about his wishes being properly executed. Benjamin knew. Somehow, my gentle, trusting son had seen through Cassandra's performance and taken steps to protect what mattered most to him. Tomorrow, I would learn exactly what those steps were, and Cassandra's carefully constructed narrative about the grieving widow with no legal claim to question would begin to crumble. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I found myself smiling for the first time since Benjamin died. My boy had been smarter than any of us realized. Harold Morrison's law office sat in a converted Victorian house on Elm Street, the kind of place that whispered old money and careful planning. As I climbed the creaking wooden steps, my heart hammered against my ribs. Whatever Benjamin had done, whatever secrets he left behind, I was about to learn them all. Harold met me at the door himself, a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s who'd handled my family's legal matters for over 20 years. He'd drawn up my own will, helped with Benjamin's adoption paperwork when I was a single mother, and guided us through my late husband's estate. His face was grave as he led me to his office. "Ruth, before we begin, I want you to know that Benjamin came to see me on March 15th. That was exactly 3 weeks before the accident." Harold opened the folder and withdrew a document sealed in a clear plastic sleeve. Benjamin was worried about his marriage. He didn't go into details, but he mentioned that Cassandra had been pressuring him about finances, asking detailed questions about his assets, his life insurance policy, even his teaching pension benefits.
I leaned forward, my hands gripping the leather armrests of my chair. What did he tell you? He said Cassandra had suggested several times that they should consolidate their finances, put everything in joint accounts, maybe even add her name to the house deed just in case something happened. She framed it as responsible financial planning for married couples. Harold's expression darkened, but Benjamin felt uncomfortable. He said it seemed premature for an 18-month marriage, especially since they'd kept separate finances up until then. The pieces began clicking into place. All those extra tutoring jobs Benjamin had taken, the stress about money I'd noticed, Cassandra had been pushing him toward financial decisions that benefited her while making him feel irresponsible for hesitating. "There's more," Harold continued, pulling out another document. Benjamin also mentioned that Cassandra had been asking about his family history, specifically about what would happen to his assets if he died without a will. She told him she'd read an article about how complicated probate could be for surviving spouses in certain situations. A chill ran down my spine. She was researching inheritance law? It appears so. Benjamin said she seemed unusually knowledgeable about the subject for someone who claimed to be just casually concerned. Harold set the document down carefully. That's when Benjamin decided he needed legal protection, not just for himself, but for the things that mattered most to him. He turned the first document toward me, and I saw Benjamin's familiar handwriting at the bottom, his signature witnessed and notarized. This is Benjamin's last will and testament, executed on March 15th and filed with the county clerk's office the same day. I stared at the papers, afraid to read them, afraid to hope. What does it say? Harold smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "Benjamin left everything to you, Ruth.
The house, both cars, his savings accounts, his pension benefits, his life insurance policy, everything. Cassandra is specifically excluded from any inheritance. The room seemed to tilt around me. Everything? Everything. But there's more. Harold flipped to another page. Benjamin also included very specific instructions about his belongings. The Mustang is to go to the Riverside Boys and Girls Club, specifically to their automotive program, with the stipulation that it be completed by the kids and used for educational purposes. His teaching materials and library are to go to Clearwater Elementary. His tools are to be given to the community college's vocational program. Tears blurred my vision as I read Benjamin's careful instructions. Every item was thoughtfully placed, every decision made with love and purpose. This wasn't just a will. It was a love letter to his community, a final act of teaching and giving. "There's also this," Harold said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in Benjamin's handwriting. He asked me to give this to you personally when I read the will. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded a single sheet of paper. "Mom, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me and Harold is following my instructions. I hope I'm wrong about Cassandra. I really do. I want to believe that the woman I married loves me for who I am, not what I can provide for her. But lately I've been seeing things that worry me. She's been different since we got married, more interested in my financial situation than my day at school, more concerned about my life insurance than my life. She asks questions about you too, Mom, about your house, your savings, whether you've made arrangements for your own estate. It makes me uncomfortable. I've tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she's just being practical. Maybe she's worried about our future. But then I found some papers in her car, printouts about inheritance law, about how to contest wills, about spousal rights in probate court. When I asked her about them, she said she was helping a client, but something in her eyes told me she was lying. I hope I never have to use this will. I hope Cassandra and I work through whatever this is, maybe with counseling or just better communication. But if something does happen to me, I need to know that the things I care about will go to people who will cherish them the way I do. Take care of the Mustang project, Mom. Those kids at the Boys and Girls Club will love finishing what I started. And don't let Cassandra convince you that I wanted her to have everything. I know she can be very persuasive, very convincing. But you know me better than anyone. You know what really mattered to me. I love you, Mom. Thank you for teaching me that family isn't about what you can get from people. It's about what you can give. Benjamin. I was sobbing by the time I finished reading. Harold quietly handed me a box of tissues and waited while I composed myself. "There's one more thing," he said gently. Benjamin was very specific about the timing of this revelation. He asked me not to contact Cassandra about the will for at least 2 weeks after his death. He wanted to see what she would do, how she would handle his estate before she learned the truth. "He was testing her," I whispered.
It appears so, and based on what you've told me about her behavior over the past week, I'd say his instincts were correct. Harold leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming businesslike. Now, Ruth, we need to discuss next steps. As the sole beneficiary of Benjamin's estate, you have some decisions to make. Cassandra has been operating under the assumption that she inherits everything, and she's already taken several actions based on that assumption. What kind of actions? She's listed the house with a real estate agent. She's scheduled an auction for this weekend to sell Benjamin's tools and car parts. She's even contacted Benjamin's bank about accessing his accounts. Harold's jaw tightened. None of which she has any legal right to do. The magnitude of Cassandra's deception hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been grieving my son, she'd been systematically dismantling his life, selling off pieces of his legacy like a vulture picking over bones. What can we do to stop her? Harold smiled grimly. Quite a lot, actually. First, I'll be contacting the real estate agent to inform them that the house is not legally available for sale. Second, I'll be sending a cease and desist letter to the auction house. Third, I'll be notifying Benjamin's bank that Cassandra has no claim to his accounts.
He pulled out a calendar and made several notes. The probate process will take a few weeks to complete, but I can file an emergency injunction to prevent any further disposal of estate assets. By tomorrow morning, Cassandra's little liquidation spree will come to a complete halt. And then? Then we'll schedule a formal reading of the will. Cassandra will be required to attend, along with any other interested parties. She'll learn in an official legal setting that she has no claim to Benjamin's estate whatsoever. I thought about Cassandra in Benjamin's garage with her clipboard, calculating the value of his tools. I thought about her dismissing his teaching materials as junk and his handmade jewelry box as potential artisan craft. I thought about her lies about Benjamin's supposed wishes, her fictional conversations about him wanting her to choose money over sentiment. "Harold," I said slowly, "I want to be there when you tell her. I want to see her face when she realizes that Benjamin saw right through her." He nodded approvingly. "I was hoping you'd say that. Benjamin specifically requested that you be present for the will reading. He wanted you to see justice done." As I left Harold's office that afternoon, Benjamin's letter clutched in my hand. I felt something I hadn't experienced since his death. Pride. My son had been wiser than any of us realized. He'd seen the truth about his wife and taken steps to protect what mattered most to him. Cassandra thought she was playing a grieving mother for a fool. She had no idea that the fool was about to become the executor of an estate that would leave her with nothing but the bitter taste of her own greed. The game was about to change, and Benjamin had written all the rules. Harold wasted no time. By 9 a.m. the next morning, his assistant had hand-delivered cease and desist letters to Pemberton Real Estate, Millbrook Auction House, and Riverside First National Bank. By 10 a.m., my phone was ringing. "Ruth, what the hell is going on?" Cassandra's voice was sharp, cutting through the speaker like broken glass. "Some lawyer just called the real estate agent saying the house can't be sold. They're saying I don't have authority over Benjamin's estate." I took a careful sip of my morning coffee, savoring the moment. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt completely calm. "That's correct, Cassandra. You don't." "What do you mean I don't? I'm his wife. Everything automatically goes to the spouse unless there's a will, and Benjamin never made a will." "Actually," I said down my cup with deliberate precision, "Benjamin did make a will, a very thorough one." The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Higher, more strained. "That's impossible. Benjamin would have told me. We discussed it several times, and he always said he didn't see the point since we were married." Apparently, his perspective changed. I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the maple tree Benjamin had climbed as a boy. "Harold Morrison will be conducting a formal reading of the will on Friday at 2 p.m. You're required to attend." This is ridiculous. The mask was slipping now, her carefully maintained widow's grief cracking like old paint. "Whatever document you think you found, it can't be legal. Benjamin was my husband. I have rights." "We'll see about that on Friday." I hung up before she could respond, then immediately called Harold to let him know Cassandra had been notified. The next phase of our plan was already in motion. Over the next 3 days, I watched with quiet satisfaction as Cassandra's carefully constructed world began to crumble. The real estate agent called to inform her that the listing had been suspended pending legal clarification. The auction house refunded the fees she'd paid to fast-track Benjamin's belongings into their weekend sale. The bank froze access to Benjamin's accounts until probate could be properly completed. But I wasn't content to simply wait for Friday's revelation. Benjamin's letter had mentioned that Cassandra seemed unusually interested in my own financial situation, asking questions about my house in savings. If she had been calculating Benjamin's worth, she probably had been calculating mine, too. I decided to do some investigating of my own.
Wednesday afternoon, I called my neighbor Dorothy, who lived 2 houses down from Benjamin on Maple Street.
Dorothy was retired, spent most of her time gardening in her front yard, and noticed everything that happened in the neighborhood. "Oh my, yes," Dorothy said when I asked if she'd seen anything unusual at Benjamin's house lately. "That wife of his has been there every day since the funeral, sometimes twice a day, usually with different people. Men in suits, a woman with a clipboard, someone driving a big truck." "What kind of truck?" "One of those estate sale companies. I saw them loading boxes into it yesterday. Looked like they were cleaning the place out completely." My stomach clenched. Despite the legal injunctions, Cassandra was still trying to liquidate Benjamin's belongings, probably selling to private buyers or under-the-table dealers who wouldn't ask questions about ownership. I called Harold immediately. Within an hour, he'd arranged for a sheriff's deputy to secure the property and document any missing items. What they found infuriated me beyond words. Benjamin's garage had been stripped bare. The Mustang was still there, too visible and valuable to steal without immediate detection, but every tool, every spare part, every piece of equipment had vanished. The house itself had been ransacked with surgical precision. Anything small and valuable was gone. Benjamin's coin collection, his father's watch, the antique camera he'd inherited from his grandfather. "She's been selling things piece by piece," Harold explained when he called with the deputy's report. "Smart enough not to try moving the big items that are easily traceable, but systematic about everything else. We're talking about theft of estate property worth thousands of dollars." "Can we stop her?" "We can do better than that. We can prosecute her." Harold's voice carried a grim satisfaction that matched my own mood. Theft of estate property is a felony in this state, especially when the amounts involved exceed $5,000. And based on what's missing from that house, we're looking at grand larceny charges. But I had a better idea. "Harold, what if we let her think she's getting away with it? What if we let her come to the will reading believing she's already won?" "What do you mean?" "Don't file the theft charges yet. Don't tell her we know about the missing items. Let her walk into that conference room on Friday thinking she's outsmarted us all. Then, after we read the will and she realizes she's getting nothing, we hit her with the evidence of what she's stolen." Harold was quiet for a moment, considering. That's actually quite strategic. The emotional impact of learning about the will first, then discovering we have evidence of her crimes would be devastating. She'd be more likely to confess, maybe even tell us where the missing items are. "Benjamin wanted to see what kind of person she really was," I said, thinking of his letter. "Well, now we know. She's a thief who steals from the dead." Thursday evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Cassandra appeared at my door around 7 o'clock, dressed in black again, her makeup expertly applied to suggest sleepless nights and endless grief. "Ruth, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'm worried there's been some kind of misunderstanding." I invited her in, curious to see what strategy she'd chosen for this performance. "I've been doing some research," she continued, settling onto my living room couch with practiced grace. "Sometimes when people are grieving, they can be influenced by others who don't have their best interests at heart. Lawyers, for instance, who see an opportunity to complicate simple situations." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting Harold Morrison is lying about Benjamin's will?" "I'm saying that grief makes us vulnerable, and some people, not you of course, but some people might take advantage of that vulnerability to create legal documents that don't reflect what someone really wanted." The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually suggesting that I had somehow forged Benjamin's will to steal his assets from her. "Benjamin loved me, Ruth. Whatever document Harold claims to have, it can't possibly reflect Benjamin's true wishes. He would never have left me with nothing." "Why not?" I asked simply. The question seemed to catch her off guard. "What do you mean? Why wouldn't Benjamin leave you with nothing? What had you done to earn his estate?" She blinked rapidly, clearly scrambling for an answer. "I was his wife. I loved him. We had plans together, dreams we wanted to fulfill." "What dreams?"
Well, we wanted to travel, see Europe, maybe buy a bigger house, start a family. Benjamin hated traveling. He got carsick on trips longer than an hour. And he loved his house exactly as it was. He spent years fixing it up to his specifications. People change, Ruth. Marriage changes people. Yes, it does. The question is whether it changes them for better or for worse. Cassandra must have sensed she was losing ground because she switched tactics, reaching across to take my hand with both of hers. Look, even if there is some document, we don't have to fight about this. We're family now. Benjamin would want us to work together, to honor his memory by taking care of each other. What are you proposing?
Well, the house is probably worth $400,000, maybe more. Benjamin's other assets, the cars, the savings, the insurance, probably another $200,000. If we split everything 50-50, we'd both be comfortable. You'd have enough to live well for the rest of your life, and I'd have enough to start over. There it was. She thought she was being generous, offering me half of my own son's estate as if she had any right to negotiate its distribution. That's very thoughtful of you, Cassandra, but I think we should wait and see what Benjamin's will actually says. Her grip on my hand tightened slightly. Ruth, please, I know you don't like me very much, and I understand that, but Benjamin did love me. Whatever problems we might have had, whatever misunderstandings, he wouldn't have wanted me left with nothing. If that's true, I said, gently extracting my hand from hers, then tomorrow's will reading should put your mind at ease. She left a few minutes later, but not before making one final attempt at manipulation. You know, Ruth, fighting this will could get very expensive. Legal battles over estates can drag on for years, cost tens of thousands in attorney fees. Even if you won, you might find there's nothing left to inherit. Are you threatening to contest Benjamin's will? I'm just saying that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is compromise, for Benjamin's sake. After she left, I called Harold to report the conversation. She's getting desperate, he said. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. She also threatened to contest the will if I don't agree to split the estate with her. Let her try. Benjamin's will is airtight, and we have evidence of her attempting to steal estate property. Any judge would see through her claims in minutes. That night, I slept better than I had since Benjamin's death. Tomorrow, Cassandra would finally learn the truth about my son's final wishes, and justice, delayed but not denied, would finally be served. Friday arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully that morning, not in black like a grieving mother, but in navy blue, the color of authority and resolution. Today wasn't about mourning anymore. Today was about justice. Harold's conference room felt different when filled with people. Besides Harold and myself, there was Cassandra, of course, looking pale but determined in another expensive black dress. She'd brought someone with her, a sharp-faced man in an ill-fitting suit who introduced himself as Derek Walsh, her attorney. There was also a court reporter, the sheriff's deputy who documented the theft, and Detective Martinez from the county prosecutor's office, though Cassandra didn't know why they were there yet. "Thank you all for coming," Harold began, settling behind his polished conference table with Benjamin's will in front of him. "We're here for the formal reading of Benjamin Michael Hartford's last will and testament, executed on March 15th of this year." Cassandra's lawyer immediately interjected. "Before we proceed, I'd like to state for the record that my client disputes the validity of any document dated after her marriage to the deceased. As his lawful wife, Mrs. Hartford has legitimate expectations regarding the disposition of the estate." "Your objection is noted, Mr. Walsh. However, the will we're about to read was properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the county clerk. Its validity is not in question." He opened the document and began to read. "I, Benjamin Michael Hartford, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and declare this to be my last will and testament." I watched Cassandra's face carefully as Harold continued through the legal preamble. She sat rigidly upright, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Beside him, Derek Walsh scribbled notes with aggressive strokes of his pen.
To my wife, Cassandra Winters Hartford, I leave the sum of $1 and no other consideration, having determined that she has demonstrated interests incompatible with the values and relationships I hold most dear. The reaction was instantaneous. Cassandra shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. That's impossible. Benjamin would never. He couldn't. Please sit down, Mrs. Hartford, Harold said calmly. There's more. Derek Walsh browed Cassandra's arm, pulling her back into her seat while whispering urgently in her ear. But I could see she was barely hearing him. Her face had gone ashen, her breathing shallow and rapid. Harold continued reading Benjamin's careful instructions, how the house would come to me, how the Mustang would go to the Boys and Girls Club, how his teaching materials would return to Clearwater Elementary. Each bequest was thoughtful, meaningful, designed to honor Benjamin's values and continue his legacy of giving. The remainder of my estate, including all bank accounts, investments, life insurance proceeds, and personal property not otherwise designated, I leave to my mother, Ruth Elizabeth Hartford, who taught me that love is measured not by what we can take, but by what we choose to give. When Harold finished reading, the silence in the room was deafening. Cassandra sat frozen, staring at the table as if she could will the words to change. Derek Walsh was frantically flipping through papers, clearly scrambling for some legal angle to challenge what he'd just heard. "This is fraud," Cassandra said, her voice barely audible. "Benjamin loved me. He would never leave me with nothing. Someone forced him to write this, or forged his signature."
Harold reached into his folder and withdrew another document. "Actually, Mrs. Hartford, your husband left you something else, a letter." He handed her the sealed envelope Benjamin had prepared. With trembling fingers, Cassandra tore it open and read. I couldn't see Benjamin's words, but I watched her face crumble as she processed them. Whatever my son had written, it was clear he'd known exactly who Cassandra was and what she'd been planning. "No," she said, crumpling the letter in her fist. "This is all lies. Benjamin was confused, or sick, or someone manipulated him into thinking—" Mrs. Hartford, Detective Martinez spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through her protests. "I think we need to discuss some other matters." Derek Walsh immediately went into defensive mode. "My client doesn't have to discuss anything without—" "Actually, she does," Detective Martinez replied, pulling out his own folder. "Mrs. Hartford, over the past week, you've removed property from 247 Maple Street with an estimated value exceeding $15,000. Property that, as we've just established, legally belongs to Mrs. Ruth Hartford." The color drained completely from Cassandra's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Benjamin's coin collection, valued at approximately $3,000. His father's Rolex watch, worth around $5,000. Various tools and automotive parts totaling another $7,000. Detective Martinez read from his list with methodical precision. "We have testimony from neighbors who witnessed you loading items into vehicles. We have receipts from pawn shops and estate buyers who purchased items you sold them." "That's impossible," Derek Walsh interjected. "My client doesn't have to discuss anything without—" "Actually, she does," Harold said firmly. "As we've just established, Benjamin's will explicitly excludes her from any inheritance. Every item she removed from that house constitutes theft of estate property." Cassandra was hyperventilating now, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "I didn't steal anything. Those were gifts. Benjamin gave me those things." "Really?" I spoke for the first time since the reading began. "Benjamin gave you his father's watch? The one his dad wore every day until he died? The one Benjamin treasured because it was his only connection to the father he lost when he was 12? She looked at me with wild eyes. "Yes, he said I should have something to remember him by." "When did he give it to you, Cassandra? Before or after you started researching inheritance law? Before or after you asked him about putting your name on the house deed? How did you—" She stopped, realizing she was admitting to conversations she'd never told anyone about. Detective Martinez leaned forward. "Mrs. Hartford, we'd like you to come to the station and answer some questions about the missing property. You have the right to remain silent, but—" "Wait!" Cassandra's voice cracked with desperation. "Wait, please. I can explain everything."
The next 20 minutes were among the most uncomfortable of my life. Cassandra, realizing she was trapped, began a rambling confession that painted a picture of systematic manipulation and calculation. She admitted to researching Benjamin's finances before they were even engaged. She confessed to pressuring him about joint accounts and life insurance beneficiaries. She revealed that she'd been selling his belongings piecemeal since the day after his funeral, convinced she could liquidate everything before anyone discovered Benjamin had made a will. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I needed security. I've been in debt for years. My real estate career was failing, and Benjamin was so successful, so stable. I thought if we got married, I could finally stop worrying about money." "So you targeted my son like a mark in a con game," I said quietly. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "It wasn't like that at first. I did care about him, but then when I realized how much he was worth and how naive he was about money..." "You saw an opportunity." "I thought he'd never know. I thought we'd be happy together, and the financial stuff would just be insurance. But then he started asking questions, getting suspicious. He changed the locks on his house without telling me. He started keeping his bank statements in a safe deposit box. I knew he was pulling away, and I panicked. I found out about the will by accident. I saw Harold Morrison's business card in his jacket pocket and called the office, pretending to be his wife, asking about an appointment. The receptionist mentioned something about estate planning documents. That's when I knew I had to act fast." "Act fast to do what?" Detective Martinez asked. "To get what I could before anyone found out what Benjamin had done." The confession lasted another hour. By the end of it, Cassandra had admitted to theft of estate property, fraud, and attempting to sell assets she knew didn't belong to her. Derek Walsh looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. 3 months later, Cassandra pled guilty to grand larceny and fraud charges. She was sentenced to 18 months in county jail and ordered to pay restitution for all the items she'd stolen and sold. Most of Benjamin's belongings were recovered, though some had been sold to private collectors and were harder to trace.
The house on Maple Street stands empty now. I couldn't bear to sell it, but I couldn't bear to live there either, surrounded by memories of Benjamin's final months and the woman who betrayed him. Instead, I've decided to donate it to the school district for use as a residential facility for visiting teachers and education students. Benjamin would have loved that. The Mustang Project has become something beautiful. The kids at the Boys and Girls Club have thrown themselves into completing Benjamin's restoration work with the kind of enthusiasm and reverence he would have appreciated. They've named their automotive program the Hartford Workshop in his honor, and they send me pictures of their progress every week. As for me, I've learned something valuable about love and protection. For years, I thought being a good mother meant accepting everyone Benjamin brought into our lives, supporting his choices even when my instincts screamed warnings. I thought love meant trusting that everything would work out if I just stayed positive and supportive. Benjamin taught me better. His final letter, his careful planning, his willingness to protect what mattered most, even when it hurt, that was real love. Not the blind acceptance I'd practiced, but the fierce protection of what's truly valuable. I still miss my son every day, but I'm no longer angry about how his story ended. Benjamin saw clearly, acted wisely, and ensured that his legacy would serve others rather than feed someone's greed. In his final act, he showed more wisdom than I'd displayed in years of enabling Cassandra's manipulation. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes it means refusing to let people take advantage of your grief or guilt. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to face the consequences of their choices. Benjamin understood that. And finally, so do I.